Hey, welcome to Leadership Within, the moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. I'm your host, TK, and I'm joined by
Vanessa.
Happy New Year, Vanessa.
Yeah, it feels like we've just kind of crashed straight into it, doesn't it? It's flying already.
It is. I've got another one for you. I've just realized, I know it's a bit of a plain realization, that it's already been 5 years since 2020. Can you imagine?
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know if there's any refund policy, but I would definitely consider possibly, redoing the last 5 years.
Can I have
Having
my money
said
back,
that,
please?
yeah, or at least a part, at least give me a quarter. Having said all that, Vanessa, I don't know about you, but I think, whatever it has been, there is always experiences that are shaping us,
Oh
isn't
my
it?
goodness.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah. And I kind of think that's a really good way to look at it, isn't it?
It is, and it's a good way to go into this wonderful episode because what we wanted to talk about, and we've spoken about it before a bit, but there's an interesting thing that happens in the new year and many other times too, which is we're making plans, we're getting goals, we're approaching new things, and what I've noticed with the leaders I work with myself too, and people that look up to me for leadership is, as leaders, we're supposed to know where we're supposed to go. So there's a saying, you might have heard it, which is a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And you know what? I think it's complete rubbish.
Yeah, I hear you. I am kind of, I was in my head was like, who says a leader's supposed to know?
That's a good one, right? Yeah, it's probably quite American, which is like we're all supposed to be this particular leader. But you're quite right. Who is it to actually be the person outlining all the leadership roles, making sure that this particular trait is in all the leaders? I actually think that it's just inhuman to expect someone to always be the oracle, always have the right answers. And I believe this is one of the biggest challenges of leaders, even the ones that are, quite skillful. You would consider them good leaders, that people are looking up to them for answers constantly. And I've had a few clients, even myself I had this experience. But Vanessa, I was wondering if you've shared this experience too. Have you seen this in action?
Yeah, I think so. But I also, what you've got me thinking about is just that it's kind of built into our programming, isn't it? Because, when we're born, our parents know better, then our teachers know better, they know the way. And so I kind of think like we're shaped into it right from the get go of just assuming, and in fairness, we actually need that, don't we? At those moments where we really, are needing support for
Mm-hmm.
survival, we need someone to lead the way and to say, okay, here's what you do, here's how you do it.
It certainly brings safety. I get it. And I think, that's an interesting thing. It's definitely a need. But as with many things in life, I believe that it has a shadow, both for the leader and for the people that feel this need. Because you see, I believe that, yes, we do need safety. And I will say that, right? We do need safety. And, people, we want to feel like there's someone that knows. But on the other hand, what happens is it may lead us to abdicate our own thinking
Yeah,
and
I think that's totally
look at
right.
this person.
Yeah, yeah, and like I think what I'm noticing is just the how if we're raised in a way that has us kind of seek answers and knowledge outside of ourselves, then at what point does the baton get handed over, and
Mm.
do we then realize that actually, most things are uncertain and unknown, and having that safety within us embodied, we then can navigate through our own risk taking rather than, what you're describing, which is, well, I'm going to look upwards to the person above me and he's going to know, or she's going to know, or they're going to know, the answer, and which does abdicate power, responsibility, many things, doesn't it?
Yeah, but there's two things that you've mentioned that are quite interesting, I think. One is making sure that you embody this safety as a person. So that's one thing. But the other is, I think it's quite hurtful to the leader itself. So what I've heard you say, which is interesting, and as you were saying that, I started imagining something else. Because what I've started imagining is when you were used to looking for answers in others and you become a leader, this passing of the baton is suddenly you realize that others are looking to you for answers. And it's quite an interesting moment, realizing that, oh, now I am supposed to know.
Yeah, well, I think it can really play into your ego too, right? It's like for those of us that like to know, I think it's really challenging. And I, if I think about clients that come from that place of, I need to have the answers, and people are relying on me, and it tends to be that they're doing a lot of work for themselves, and they're not really holding people resourceful and accountable in the way that they could be. So I kind of think the model is set up to fail.
It is, although one would say that we've been in this model for quite some time now in terms of the history of humanity. So, we're still alive. The world is still turning in the right direction, somewhat. I don't know what you think about 2025. I'm hoping it will be better than 2024. Having said all that, Vanessa, one thing that I might say is it's not necessary. Well, okay, so there's a thing that I maybe disagree with, which is the problem here is that I'll tell you a story, right? So I actually have a client, and they are a person that's quite knowledgeable. They're a person that had a functional role and been promoted from this functional role into managing a team. They're a skilled leader, definitely, and I think that they're doing a good job. But some people in their team are actually quite well aware that this particular leader is also a functional expert. And obviously, just by the fact that this person, this leader, is able to execute and deliver these functional tasks in a good way, and also the people in their team believe that they're better than themselves, it causes a bit of a problem. And this particular person has a dilemma. Should they be hiding their skill? Or should they be contributing? And it's a real difficult thing for them to solve. And I was wondering, what's your opinion there, Vanessa? Have you seen leaders that have this problem?
Oh my gosh, there's so much in what you said. Where do I go? um, I think that there's some kind of assumptions in there, and not knowing this person, it would be easy for me to assume different things. But for me, I think it goes back to what's the role of a leader versus the role of a technical expert, and whether this leader has insight, technical knowledge, whatever it is. It's not sustainable for them to be trying to lead and be an individual contributor. I think that's
Absolutely,
really tricky.
Yeah.
So, there are so many things that, where does that leave? Like, what's going on with the team and their development and where they are, that has them, not openly discuss this and raise this and talk about it. I suppose there's so many different angles that you could take with that.
There are,
But
right? Yeah.
I think for me, it's about, who am I as a leader and what kind of stake in the ground do I want to have? What's the legacy that I'm trying to leave? What's the imprint that's important here? What's my way of being, and how do I set things up so that I can lead with intention and clarity, and there may be growing pains.
There always are. And I think, interestingly, in this situation, it's not that the person is tempted to do the individual contributor tasks, as in their functional tasks. They know that it's not their role. And, kudos to them for that. But it's an interesting one to have this conversation with the team, to say that, well, obviously I'm delegating, I'm empowering, but you can't grow if you don't make your own mistakes, and making sure that I allow these mistakes to happen. It's difficult for many people to accept the fact that they will be able to make mistakes, and the leader is letting them make these mistakes, even if they have the experience and skill to do things differently. I find that not many teams are easily accepting that. I think that the role of the leader is to show so much care that this is possible, to create the environment. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think is that not only the teams accepting that, but is the human being that's the leader accepting that, because that's quite a hard knock to take sometimes, isn't it? If you've got goals, deliverables that you need to deliver on, and you're saying, I know that there's got to be room for error, growth, learning. It might be that you discern. I mean, what I heard in your example is there's a gap. There's a gap between, whether it's a knowledge gap or a behavior gap or whatever, there's a gap. And the question is, how are we going to fill that? What's the cost benefit analysis of a leader stepping in to fill it, in the short term versus long term? I think there's a whole load of different things around it. But also this idea that we're all leaders, right? So how is everybody within that dynamic? Most of us know when there's a gap, don't we?
Yeah.
And what do we do in the gap? Do we ignore the gap? Do we pretend it's not there? Do we, wait, what do we do?
Well, I think in this case, and I think, it's not that the leader has discovered it here, maybe yet, but in general, I could say that it's all about having a sincere conversation about this difficult issue. Because as you say, there is a gap between expectations and ability. Whether the expectation is correct or not, I think so many times a leader is having expectations, but they're being unsaid. And it is causing a lot of friction. And, I feel a lot for the people that look up to these leaders for guidance, and they're a bit stuck. They're a bit miffed about, what is the actual expectation? Should I be asking questions if I don't know what to do? Or am I okay to make mistakes? It's such a difficult conversation to have, isn't it?
Definitely. But I think it's that contracting conversation, isn't it? That can we have a, whether we call it a social contract, what designed alliance, whatever we call it, but how are we going to be around these simple everyday things that are going to occur? What do we, what can we rely on each other for? And I think so often we jump in, and then and then it gets messy, and then we're kind of like, well, what do we do now? Whereas I think at least if we have some of those elements in place where we outline how we're going to be together when it gets difficult, then at least we've got that backup plan that we can lean into each other and say, oh, how are we doing on this right now?
It's a good one. And, definitely I agree with you. Although, obviously, the contracting itself is probably another episode of our podcast. There's a different angle though, and a different situation that, we possibly ourselves find ourselves in as a popular word now, sole entrepreneurs. And you're a leader of yourself, a leader of your own small business, of your destiny. And in fact, there's no one to tell you if you're right or wrong.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting situation to occupy as we're making our plans for 2025.
Oh
How
my
do you deal
goodness.
with that,
Uh,
Vanessa?
Sometimes not very well, if I'm honest. So I think the thing that I learned in 2024, which was probably the hardest thing for me to learn, was that I can't let my feelings drive my decision making. And what I mean by that, is that it's constantly about looking at what's the data telling me, what's because if I'm feeling a particular way, so if I'm feeling anxious because I don't know, I've released something and I've marketed something and it's not, and it's crickets or whatever, then it's really easy for me to kind of panic and think, oh, and then that would then drive decision making, which would be absolutely useless. So for me, I just think it's totally about balancing feelings and logic, and thought processes, and making decisions in the moment, knowing that we're going to have to keep pivoting, and not making it mean it's right or wrong. It's just information.
It's true. Although, interestingly, as we all know, when we receive a certain piece of information, our body reacts. We react with emotion, right? So we can probably talk about examples, but as you say, even crickets after you've published something that you were hoping would be a good piece of content, or, a silence from a prospect that you were hoping to make a great deal with. I don't think we can shut ourselves away from that. The big question is, how do we integrate this into our decision making? Because to be honest, Vanessa, is it really realistic for us to completely ignore it and become this machine to be just fed with data?
No, and I don't think it's about ignoring it. If I was to qualify what I'm saying, I think it's about understanding your emotional habits and patterns. And so anxiety is one that I can run, but it can also drive a lot of work, like a lot of my output, can come from, anxiety can feel really similar like to excitement. So, I think we're masters of deception. And, I would never walk around going, oh, I'm a really anxious person. Cause I don't feel that inside. And I know that when I'm at an edge, I can feel anxious. So if I'm feeling that, then I know that my thinking tends to be more reactive and, fearful. And therefore it has that quality to it of, oh my God, what do I need to do next? It's a bit like, if you ever watched Dad's Army, it's a bit like panic Captain Mannering going on inside my head, and I think it's just that, okay, in those moments, probably don't do anything, Vanessa, just notice it. And so for me, I think it's about really recognizing the patterns, and then what comes up, if there's limiting stuff that comes up, that's just old, and then kind of going, okay, this is where you go, so you can become more effective knowing the kind of emotional habit that you run. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does, right? Because it's interesting. In the moment, it's easy to make a rash choice. But as you said yourself, we yearn this feeling of security, this feeling of, okay, yeah, I'm on the right path for the dark forest of business and life. And there are very little way signs telling us where the right path is. But I'm just wondering if we are choosing to be solo entrepreneurs and walk this dark forest constantly. I mean, I guess that's fear and anxiety will be our constant companion.
Yeah. And
Is that true?
I think that's what's really, I once had this coach that said to me, your business will be your best spiritual teacher. And it's like, ugh. But it's so true because I think, fear and anxiety, it's really easy with anxiety to go into control or perfection.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm going to control all the data variables and I'm going to make sure everything's perfect and then it will all be okay. And I think, this idea that actually, you're going to come up against all that kind of stuff in your business. And then seeing it as, oh, wow, okay, this is something that, I know I bang on about healing, but it's like, oh, there's something in here, in this shadow that I need to, address and look at and meet differently rather than make all this meaning about it and then find that I used to find in my business that I'd have these
Hmm.
really like up cycles and then real, like it was just on, off, on, off, on, off. And now I can just see the rhythm, I can see that and I think the beauty about working as an associate is you see the rhythm in other people's businesses, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And it was funny because one of my old business coaches posted this thing about what's your word of the year, and I kind of rolled my eyes and thought, oh,
Another
like
LinkedIn
I know
post.
another thing that we've got to do. But I thought if I was going to choose a word of the year, I think the word for me is consistency because I'm a kind of go with the flow, intuitive kind of person. But in business, the thing that we most need is consistency. Okay, we need to adapt and we need to be agile, but I think we do need to consistently show up. Um, yeah, so that's just
Well,
my kind of thought
no, no,
process.
no. I totally, totally appreciate this. It's interesting that there's always, and it's such a serendipitous conversation because, like, what can a person say that doesn't have a problem with consistency, like myself? Some of you listeners might know that, for instance, like I stream every day on LinkedIn at 9:45, and people say, "How can you keep this consistency going? How on earth?" And I said, "Well, that's quite easy, right? You just motivate yourself." And yet, Vanessa, I think that, as you say, that business is your best spiritual teacher, your best spiritual advisor, because being a leader, whether a solo entrepreneur or a executive or a leader of a team, this job will find the place that you're least comfortable with. That will find a vulnerable spot in you. In some, it might be vulnerability. In others, it might be stubbornness. Myself included. So there's that. So maybe going to the second half of our episode, let's maybe bring more shine into this and into this dark time of anxiety and not knowing where to go, this dark forest, and talk about what do we do to find our path. I know it's not always successful, but I'm sure you've got some nice techniques, Vanessa.
Well, I try and remember who I'm serving.
Hmm.
And I try and go back to what is it they're feeling and what is it they're needing. And if I don't show up, what is it they're missing? Um, so for me, I think my business is about service. Um, and, that gives me a feeling of validity, significance,
Hmm.
that I'm doing something that actually matters, that it has an impact on, humanity. So it gives me a sense of purpose. And I think, just consistently coming back to that. And sometimes, my belief can wobble, it can waver. And I can think, oh, maybe they don't really need that. And da da da. So in those moments, it's kind of going back to Well, remind yourself, Vanessa, what have people said that have worked with you?
Yeah.
What's been the impact? So for me, it's kind of coming back to that. Why am I here?
Why are you here? That's the big question, right? This can generate drive, and hopefully it helps you to, well, get the consistency going, especially in these difficult moments. I myself, with the problem I have to take a very different approach. You see, the challenge for me is possibly accepting the fact that I'm wrong. And I know it's okay. I wouldn't say it like that. I would say noticing where I'm wrong, because I'm definitely wrong. We're human. There's always something that we do that might be somehow wrong. And what I'm experiencing is really grasping for these pieces of data to know that, okay, well, someone gave me a strange look. Or there's some other signal, right? When I've mentioned that, someone said, oh, that's interesting. Now it makes me pause and think, am I doing something strange again? Am I not again shutting myself in a corner, pursuing a path that may not make sense? And for me, what's working really well is I spend a lot of time writing and reflecting, a lot of time out of my own head, talking to, writing, handwriting on paper or on my tablet, but also handwriting, to see my own words, which help me gain the perspective about everything I do, which, sometimes can be quite harsh if what you find is you're not going in the right direction. So what happens when the data is showing that, yeah, it's probably not the way to go, Vanessa? How do we accept this cold touch of data and the need to pivot?
Yeah, I think not seeing it as a personal, it's a failure. It's like what meaning do we make out of data, and how does that support us?
But then again, it's not that easy to feel that. I'll share that. Okay, well, I understand that, you can wear failure as a badge of honor. In fact, I often do. I think I've talked about it at one of the previous episodes. And yet, one would say that, well, you obviously being in the world of social media, you see so much success going on. We all know it's not true, but it's hard to dream of a successful future that might come, right? It's hard to hide yourself away from the fact that why don't these ideas succeed? Why can't I find something that's actually successful? Why is this way always eluding me? That's fine. I'm able to pivot, but where do you find the energy? Probably do what you say, Vanessa, which is talk about the purpose. But on the other hand, some people maybe pivot too much, maybe don't stick to their guns. And, when is one supposed to recognize that it's time to pivot and not to give up, or maybe do? What do you think, Vanessa?
So for some reason, I've got Leonardo. Is it Leonardo da Vinci? No, Van Gogh. Van Gogh in my head, right? And he didn't sell any paintings, did he? And I keep I'm pretty sure I've got this right, but I may have it wrong. But if you think of someone who's an artist that has to create,
yes,
right? If they're attached to, and someone's got to buy my work, or someone's got, because then that means that I'm a successful artist, then it's incredibly difficult to keep going, isn't it?
Well, he struggled, didn't he?
Yeah, but I think for a lot of people, it's like, are you? I suppose it's what are you attached to? Are you attached to outcomes? And if you're attached to outcomes, then it's really tricky, isn't it? If you have a thing where you don't want to be wrong, then my assumption is that there's a need to be right. And then if there's a need to be right, it's like, well, that's what's going to be really difficult in business, isn't it? Because what if everybody's right? Partially.
All
and
right.
It's like, okay, because I think that does, our ego is the part of us that wants to be right, that, wants to to prove something. But it's like, for the sake of what? Why does it
Well,
matter if you're right and someone's not, or you're wrong? It's like, but what's bigger than that is, I suppose, what I'm thinking.
Well, I guess your mission, as you said, Vanessa, is like, why are you here? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And for instance, if you have to engage in the wonderful activity of sales, and we spoke about this last time, and choosing the journey of a solo entrepreneur, it's your companion, I guess. One would, obviously have to expose themselves to a lot of rejection and difficulty throughout this process. Um, it might be a wonderfully growing opportunity or wonderful spiritual guide. But if I take your example of Vincent van Gogh, he didn't sell many paintings during his lifetime. He lived a very miserable life. One
Mm.
would say that his beautiful art came from it. But then again, I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. It would be great to be a valued painter like Picasso, for instance, and have the ability to be appreciated for what you do, for what your talent can bring to the world, instead of being there, making wonderful art that people can't appreciate. So, in terms of right or wrong, I guess Van Gogh was right in creating his wonderful impressionist pieces that we all love now, and we can clearly see his beautiful talent. But on the other hand, when it comes to the outcome, he might not have had the life he wanted.
Right. And but I think it's all about that embracing the suck, isn't it? And enjoying the journey of it. And it
Oh,
is
yeah.
really hard as a solo, you know, preneur, isn't it, to enjoy that journey when you've got a mortgage to pay or whatever else. But you really do know that you're alive, and you really do find your resourcefulness, and you do grow like crazy in a way that it's different to when you're employed, isn't it? Because you can't hide behind anybody. There's only you.
Yes.
That's a big
Yeah,
sigh.
that's I know, you can clearly hear, but it's not a sigh of dread or anguish. It's a sigh of, oh, it's so right. It's you have obviously the perspective I'm sharing too, but interestingly, Vanessa, I would like to ask for something that I could possibly use myself, and maybe all the solo entrepreneurs, all the leaders of themselves that have to lead through this dark forest would enjoy. How do you enjoy this experience?
I think I'm on my own learning journey with it, because I think what I have noticed is that I have
Mm,
squeezed the joy out of it um, many times. And, um, I'm really driven, and I'll work really hard. Um, and what I've realized, and continue to have to realize, is that it's really about managing my energy, my state, my capacity, um, trusting in something bigger than myself, and just keeping coming back to me, it's spirituality. It's coming back to things, um, that probably most people don't necessarily talk about in the business world. But if I can um, come back to identities that are wholesome, that support me, that, so I'm a constant learner, I'm always growing, and, whatever it is, I'm always growing and developing. Um, I've got I'm a quirky free range bird thing that I do, which just gives me permission to just think outside the box, and to just be myself. But I think, you know, ultimately confidence is about being yourself, isn't it? And so often we've got these constraints around us that I can't show or express that part of myself, because people might think blah blah blah. And so for me, if we can get to that point where we really um, see ourselves as we're constantly evolving and growing, and that if we look back at the times, like if we plotted out our lives and we mapped out on a career map, when are the time, highs and lows, when have you learned the most, it's often going to be in these really sucky moments. So I suppose for me, it's, can I talk myself down? Can I, can I can I be compassionate with myself and advocate for myself in those moments where I'm just, oh my God, what am I doing? This is too hard. Why did you, seriously, no one starts a business to feel joyful, really, did that? We all want the outcomes, but, and as you said, we see on Instagram all these people, kind of blasting out their end states of success or, whatever figures it is. But we don't realize the graft that it took to get there. So for me, it's like, what kind of attitudes will support me to take more risks, to keep showing up, to keep pivoting, to keep learning, to keep growing? Because I think otherwise I do that thing, which is I get very anxious and then I get very in my head, and then I try and control and perfect what I have. And actually I don't do the things that are going to really move me.
And as a solo entrepreneur, you have the permission to be yourself. The same way that Van Gogh had the permission to be himself in his art, to express himself. It's no one that, he was obviously, and again, serendipitous, Vanessa, he was going against the grain in his time in terms of art. He was painting the way no one else had. And now we can appreciate that. He might have had the suck throughout most of his life. But then again, his, as you said, legacy is eternal. And I think that's a wonderful example and a beautiful thing that you brought in. That the more it hurts, the more beautiful the outcome, even if you can't see it straight away.
Yeah, I think it's so often, that child's book, are we, there's one that's going, are we there yet?
Are we there yet? Yes.
It's like the most annoying question. It's like, no, we're not. We're hours away. Anyway, but it's like, I think we're kind of asking that question to ourselves, when am I ever going to get there?
Yeah, the mythical Instagram thing of million success hearts flowing and geez.
Yeah. And
maybe that's what we're imagining, can't we?
Well, that's it. And so something that I'm doing at the moment is just finding micro moments of joy every day, because sometimes it's really hard. And, this notion that, we're all just living this free radical life that is full of sunshine and rainbows is it's just not true. So, I think the more that I can train my brain to look for everyday tiny moments of joy. Like, for example, I took a picture of my bins today because I just thought it's bin day tomorrow and I'm getting rid of all this rubbish. And how amazing is that we have people that come round and, that do that job for us. But it changes the way I am with myself and the way then I can show up in the difficulty, in the suck.
And I hope that this conversation is also a small moment of joy. It is for me. I hope that it is for you, Vanessa.
Yeah, it always is.
And I hope it is also for our listeners that in this difficult time as a leader, when you're facing, having to know the way and be always right, or being a solo entrepreneur, embracing the suck, we're here for you. So like and subscribe. You can always count on us to release an episode every other Sunday, to have the conversation, to share the perspective that we have, and I hope you do find useful and valuable. So, till next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.